Hello, welcome back to the ULTRASCAPE podcast. My name is Josh Ibbett, and as always, I'm joined by Becky Waters. Hi, Becky. How are you?
Good, thank you. Still alive in Sweden. It's warmed up a little bit.
And what do you mean by warmed up?
Well, yeah, still about -10. But to be honest, I think I'd take it over. You spent about 10 minutes pre-record talking about the rain in the UK, so I think I'd take this now.
I think it's the rain in the UK and pretty much everywhere in Europe, so everyone's fed up with it. Yeah, so you're still in Sweden. You're working. Well, you're looking after some husky dogs for the winter, aren't you? So if you do hear any huskies barking in the background, that's why. It's because Becky's got a pack of ravenous huskies outside her door waiting for their
It
dinner.
is feeding time in about 1 minute, so there's a good chance that they start.
So Becky, what have we got coming up this month?
In this episode, we're going to wrap up on the Tour Wunami, which happened at the end of January, the Atlas Mountain Race, and the race around Rwanda, which at the beginning of February. We feel a couple of weeks late on this, and then we'll update on the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is finished for the 350 mile or ongoing for the 1000. And at the end of the episode, this week's guest is with Juan Antionio Flecha, and I think I managed to not say his full name the whole time and disguise the starstruckness that I was worried about before the record.
Yeah, no, it's just Juan's a really, really good guest. So we recorded that conversations beforehand, and yeah, no, it's really interesting. So listen on, and I think it's the first time we can say we've had a Tour de France stage winner on our podcast. So yeah, listen on for that. But before we get into the bulk of the podcast, of course, we need to sponsor. We need to thank our sponsors. The title sponsor of the ULTRASCAPE podcast, as always, is Redshift. And you probably know by now because I say this every episode. They do loads of really great products to make your bike more comfortable. Actually, I quite like spotting Redshift products in the bike checks and things like that. I actually saw that Cynthia won the Atlas Mountain Race on some of their aero bars, which is pretty cool. And you see plenty of the shock stop seat posts. And yeah, really great stuff. Thanks as always to Redshift for supporting us and allowing us to make this podcast. There's a little bit of a discount code which will probably pop up on your screen. If not, it's in the description below. Yeah, so thanks to those guys. And Becky, we've made the big time now. We've got another new sponsor. This is the dream. We have a beer sponsor. Look at that. So our good friend Stefano, he runs the Broom Wagon podcast, which you may well have heard. It was actually the first podcast we did together. It was on the Broom Wagon podcast, wasn't it? And when he's not podcasting, he's a man who's involved in lots of things. So he is a beer brand, Zeer beer, so 0 alcohol beers. Primarily, it's been available in Switzerland and Germany so far. However, he's launching in the UK as well. And so this was a launch collab, Burnt Mill Brewery. So yeah, really nice pale ale. Yeah, so 0 alcohol beer or 0.5. So it's basically nothing. Really nice. So yeah. Zeer is the sponsor of this episode. I'll put a link on the screen if you're interested in finding those beers. Yeah, the kind of the main range of Zeer will be available in the UK in the coming months, so that's going to be good. And hopefully, it means we get supplied with beers, Becky. And if you're lucky, when you come back from Sweden, I might have a little gift for you. If you're unlucky, I'll drink them all. So we'll see how it goes.
The first race we'll catch up on is the Iditarod Trail Invitational. As I mentioned, there are two distances that we'll talk about, the 350 mile or the 1000 mile. And earlier today, I believe it was, friend of the podcast, Justinas Navaika won the 350 mile in 3 days, 4 hours and 55 minutes, which should qualify him to do the 1000 next year. Behind him are two local riders, Curtis Henry and Seth Harney. They're approaching the finish together. It's not uncommon to see people finish together in the ITI, and it's not penalised at all, especially once you get into the 1000. The organisers don't mind that there is safety in numbers. So it's not unheard of to see 7 riders finish all together in Nome in a couple of weeks' time. Seth actually caught Curtis. I had to have a little dig into the track leaders because I thought Curtis had a pretty solid second place last night, but Seth caught him earlier this morning at about 1 a.m. local time when Curtis took a 2.5 hour stop. I don't know if it was a rest, but it was only 9 miles from the finish, which looked to really... doesn't look like something you would choose to do. Potentially it was an enforced rest with mechanical.
Yeah, I think 9 miles though in Iditarod is, I mean, it's very different, obviously fat biking through the snow. And I just remember we've been a couple of days getting this recording together, and we first checked it, Justinas, and then I checked it 24 hours later, and Justinas had only done sort of 50 or 60 miles in
Yeah.
almost 12, 24 hours. So it seems like it could be fairly slow. I think you had some data or info on the record for that 350, didn't you? In terms of time.
In the 3 days, 4 hours looks about normal. Last year was, if anyone's using last year as a reference point, that was the anomaly. It was under 2 days, and there was such little snow coming out of Anchorage along the trail that it wasn't really a snow race. Certainly, first half of the 350 was quite a lot of dirt, so it was just quick. So much so that the dog sled race actually changed its start location from Anchorage to, I want to say Fairbanks, just to move a bit further north and start in the snow. So yeah, last year was pretty quick. 3 days, 4 hours is pretty standard, but there's so much change every year. It's really hard to tell what's normal.
Even within races, isn't it? If the snow comes in, then it's just walking, which I've heard the stories. Well, we'll talk about Jay in a minute, but he took great glee in telling me how he walked for like 2 days straight once. Sounds grim, to be honest, doesn't it?
Absolutely, especially in a race like the ITI where there are 3 disciplines. So you could have chosen to walk it and not be pushing a bike around. You could even be on skis and be going a bit quicker. But to be walking with a bike is a bit torturous when there was a choice to not have to. The elsewhere in the 350, our lead woman is Ginny Robbins. She's 50 miles ahead of Petra Davis, and she's around miles 260 as we record. So that should be a pretty safe first place for Ginny, but who knows? I thought that about Curtis last night, so it might not be all to play for. Elsewhere in the race in the 1000, a name that most listeners will recognise is Jay Petivari, or familiarly known as JP, and he's back racing. So for anyone who didn't catch this, in summer 2023, he was hit by a driver while he was doing an individual time trial on the Tour Divide route, and he shattered his long list of injuries include a shattered left wrist, a right humerus break, multiple facial and body lacerations, and a lumbar spinal fracture that will require a back brace for 6 to 8 weeks. The product of which, almost 3 years later, has meant that he is regularly in quite a lot of pain, but he manages to manage it, enough so that he's lined up to the ITI 1000, which he's ridden 5 times before, and he has won or joint won it each time. So he really has nothing to, well, I would say he has nothing to prove on this event. I suspect it's for himself more than a result shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you have to admire him really for coming back from those injuries. I mean, I know he's probably said controversial things in the past, but he was suffering, and he's really fought hard to come back. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. And good on him, really. I mean, you just have to admire that kind of determination. And yeah, it's no easy race. It's probably one of the hardest events out there in terms of just, I guess, survival almost, isn't it?
Certainly. And I think he's currently sitting in fourth place now. He's about 50 miles behind Tyson Flaherty. And between them is Brian Stone and Jay Cable, although they look to be very close, Brian to Jay. So they've still got 750 miles left. And Jay obviously knows this route. Well, he knows this route quite well. So he almost has a very strong veteran advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the key in this kind of event. Elsewhere, in a much warmer place in Africa, there's Adrian Lechty. So we touched on his record attempt. So he's going for the Africa end-to-end record. So he's currently about 10,500 K through the 16,000 kilometer route. So that's about 60 odd percent. So he's passed through Nigeria and he's into Cameroon, and we get kind of glimpses on his Instagram. It's really worth following. There's been lots of dirt roads in Nigeria. There's also been a few areas where it's not recommended to, if you looked at your government travel advice page, you definitely wouldn't be recommended to go through these areas. But he's kind of, I don't think he cares that much. Not that he doesn't care, but he's very open-minded about this. So he's basically taken a few risks and tried to sort of look after himself. So far, he's been okay. And the next country he's heading into is the Republic of Congo, and then through the Democratic Republic of Congo. So he's right in the sort of the tropical center of Africa, I guess, at the moment. And then he'll be heading through Angola and then into more familiar ground, Namibia and South Africa. So I guess these next kind of couple of countries, certainly, once he gets towards Namibia, it's going to be slightly easier for him in terms of terrain, at least. But then, that's the beauty of it. Africa's a big continent, and there's jungle, there's mud, there's rain, there's snow up north, and then he's going to get into desert again, and then in South Africa it should be a bit more paved and easy going for him. But at the moment, he's making good progress, and so far there's been no cyclist to actually complete this attempt. So yeah, Adrian's going for that record, and by completing it, he'll be setting the benchmark.
Mm. You mentioned that we talked about this in the last episode. I feel like we've talked about Adrian every episode for the past year. He's been out there so long, and he's only 60% of the way in.
Yeah, we'll have to try and get him on the podcast when he's done. I'm sure he's got loads of fascinating stories. So yeah, we'll aim for that at some point.
Back to another continent now, in South America. The inaugural Final Frontier Patagonia starts in March, on March the 8th. There are 4 routes. They all start in a town called Portamont in Chile, which is widely considered the end of the mainland. After that, any travel through the south of Chile is bimodal, so by boat or road. There is no straight road further south from Chile. There are 4 routes: 650 kilometer, 1600 kilometer, 150 kilometer, or the longest route is 2,700 kilometers, and they're all approximately 50-50 paved to gravel. The route will be very, very familiar to anyone who has cycled north to south or south to north in Patagonia. There aren't that many options. Like I said, in the Chilean side, there's no one road going south, so there's only a couple of roads with boats between. Therefore, this route dips in and out of Argentina, and it touches on some of the biggest, most well-known tourist hotspots in Patagonia, and they are so well-known because they are so beautiful. The long route actually finishes in Ushuaia, which is widely regarded as the end of the world. It's the furthest, most southern city in the world. So there's a lot of land that these riders will cover, and it's ever-changing from the Andes around the Torres del Paine National Park, the glaciers in Argentina, to the end of the world. There's a lot of pampa, big open flat land into Ushuaia. So it's a very different route, very diverse route. And we'll see how the inaugural version of that goes. There aren't that many riders on the start list that we recognised, but it's a long way to go. So props to anyone who's made it that far.
Yeah, that'd be a fantastic journey. I think it's just one of the classics, isn't it? And I mean, it's interesting just to have a structured event around that, because I think a lot of people will be. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people touring on that route as well. So yeah, sounds good. So we'll report on that once that's done. And finally, the last little bit of news, we mentioned about sort of Canyon coming into supporting bikepackers, or officially. So the Canyon DT Swiss all-train racing team has been launched, and Marai Mollenhauer, who of course was the guest before Christmas, and Alex McCormack, who won a number of the mountain races last year, they are now pros, basically. So they're on the whole factory setup. So it's kind of interesting to see, really, because Canyon, I mean, it's primarily focused at the gravel events, but they've gone out of their way to sign, or Alex and Marai, to do bikepacking events. And this isn't like your privateers, this isn't, Canyon just giving them bikes. This is a full pro kit, everything. So they sign a contract with Canyon, and then they get told what to use. They get sent wheels, tires, chain lube, kit, almost like a pro road team style setup. So yeah, really interesting to see. I wonder if it is going to be a direction that the sport starts going, because I think actually we can say it's a sport now. It's certainly getting recognised, put it that way. Elsewhere, people like Factor have expanded their gravel team in a similar manner. So they've got some top gravel racers, and then they've got people like Cynthia Carson, Victor Bozzoni. We'll come on to those guys in a minute, and Rob Britton, actually, who all took part in the Atlas Mountain Race. And I know people or brands like Rafa have been actively searching for some of the bigger names in cycling. They already have some, like Lael, Yannick Essenheimer, Victor Bozzoni is also on Rafa. So I'm just, it just seems like, ultracycling is becoming a thing and valuable to some of the bigger brands. And I'm sure everyone will have an opinion on that, for better or worse. But yeah, just more of an interesting observation more than anything.
It was, I think we mentioned, or we hinted at the Canyon team in the last episode, and said that it was the first bikepacking team. And I got a correction from a friend about the Specialized used to sponsor quite a lot of bikepackers, and they obviously still sponsor Lael, but I think they had riders like, Sammy Sori, and is it Sarah Stormy or Sturm?
Yeah.
Just,
I think the main thing with the Canyon thing, the team, is it's like they're not. I think a lot of riders, like Leo, for example, is pretty much she's a specialized factory, but she's kind of a privateer. She gets her own other sponsors. These guys and girls are just basically, they sign direct with Canyon. You know, they're getting paid. It's their job now, and they just the team has sponsors. So it's not like the privateer model whereby you kind of, which is the standard thing in it. You know, for sponsored riders in bikepacking and ultras at the moment, it's kind of like you get your bike deal maybe here, you might get some kit, you might have to buy helmets or something or shoes, and you know, you might manage to get some tires, but this is everything. It's like the whole signing for a World Tour cycling team. You don't choose what you have, you just turn up, get paid, and ride your bike. So yeah, that's what Canyon are doing. It's kind of interesting. I wonder how far it'll go. I wonder if it elevates the performance of Mariah and Alex, or maybe the pressures of being a pro team might make it tougher to perform, because I know that, you know, they have to be at certain team camps and shoots, and there's certain team races they have to go to, which maybe they wouldn't necessarily go to as ultra racers. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating. I'm kind of into the business of it, you know, the logistics of it all. It's quite interesting.
We'll move on to wrapping up a couple of the races that have happened since our last episode, starting with Tour Wunami down in New Zealand at the end of January. The first note from that is probably the weather. It looked pretty horrific quite early on in the race, and it forced quite a few scratches, especially Annie, who had packed quite minimally and optimistically. There's not much. It's not a very forgiving landscape if you get caught out in the weather. There's not really anywhere to hide. And interestingly, we mentioned in the last episode, the route goes through so much private land. There are huts en route, but they are private huts and they're not open to the racers. But a couple of riders got caught out, they either camped on private land or used a private hut, and they were eventually disqualified. Those were 5 riders, including Angus Young and Meg Young, who any British followers would be very familiar with. Anyway, in the race, it was won by a man called Luke Huyes. He actually took the course record in what was hideous weather ahead of Justinas, who was very much our race favourite. Interestingly, afterwards, given he had done such a good effort and comparatively to Justinas as well, it was quite interesting to hear how much of a full-time job and family commitments he has outside of the race, which is why he doesn't think he'll be able to do many more races like this, and certainly not be able to travel too far for them. So props to him for putting out such a good ride with so much else in his life outside of racing. The women's race was pretty tight. With only 110 kilometres left, there was only 6 kilometres separate Eva Detlefsen and race veteran Peg Leyland. Eva's a former pro enduro racer. She spends most of her time in the mountains, which definitely played into her hand given the weather. And she won, having prioritised sleep early in the race. She did that by avoiding sleeping anywhere near other racers, and she even detoured, I think it was on the second night, she even detoured 2 kilometres to a hut that she knew would be empty for a proper sleep. And they turned out to be great decisions. So she took the women's win. The women's race favourites, Emma Baitup and Sami Sori, scratched. Emma scratched only on the first day with effects. She felt the effects of a concussion that she sustained a couple of weeks before the race. So that looked like a very mature but difficult decision for Emma. So we hope to see her back next year. She's won it 2 years already. Sami Sori scratched after 530 kilometres, and she had a terrible wet night on the Dampier range, which was her undoing, having not been able to find shelter. And that's pretty much it for the Tour Wunami. I rattled through that, Josh. Sorry.
That's all right. We've got loads to look forward to at the end of this episode. So yeah, we've still got that interview with Juan coming up. So we shall get through the rest of the news quickly, because it is very entertaining. And I very much enjoyed that conversation. But before we get there, and this is kind of relevant, there's a little roundup of the Atlas Mountain Race. So we kind of gave the Atlas Mountain Race, a big. We talked up a bit about the new start and the gorge you could hike through and all of this stuff. And then, as normal in the Atlas Mountain Race, the first night's always interesting. The routes always gets changed for one reason or another, and this was the case. The weather was horrendous. Absolutely hammered it with rain, and I've been complaining about the rain, as you well know. You know, southern Spain, Morocco, Portugal, they've all had really, really bad weather, and it was still hitting the Atlas Mountain Races when this race started. So the race started under rain. So the route had to be changed, and they went up and over the main road pass, which is a 2,500 metre pass with a big plateau. And then the rain stopped, and the sky cleared and it basically turned to sheet ice. There's videos on there of riders just basically riding on like a couple of inches of ice on the road on tarmac. So I think it was very, very tough on that first night. So yeah, props to anyone who survived that. Following day, it was just horrendous wind, lots of headwind. The Atlas Mountain Race is just brutal. Really is I think it's one of the toughest environments to race a bike, and it always catches people out, and it was no different this time. But regardless, we saw some great racing in the men's and the women's race. So Cynthia Carson, we mentioned her already, of course, riding those redshift bars. She pulled ahead of Kerry McPhee in the final third of the race. They were actually quite close together for most of it. But I think Cynthia, she's already won it in the past. I think experience probably played to her strengths a little bit. So she was focusing more on rest, managing to sleep a bit more kind of in shelter rather than bivvying out. Kerry was kind of bivvied out a bit more, maybe not so familiar with the course and where you could it's worth pushing forward and maybe sleeping at checkpoints and things like that. And yeah, towards the end, Kerry basically ended up slowing. Like she had a few issues. She lost some charging cables, had to buy them and stop at cafes and charge her GPS and her phone and things like that. And Cynthia rode a very consistent race and managed to take the win. So yeah, Cynthia's also doing the complete mountain race series as well. So I think she's got half an eye on that. And I did speak to her and she's saying that she was riding kind of trying not to take too many risks with things like sleep and recovery in order to recover for the next race, which is of course the Hellenic Mountain Race at the end of May. So yeah, really strong ride from Cynthia. Also a really strong ride from Kerry as a first timer. And I think that's the first race she's done, ultra race she's done outside of the UK. Elsewhere for the third place, actually it was quite an interesting race. So Christina Tamburini, she's done the race before and she was in third for a lot of the race. But she, again, sort of faded near the end, and Camille Elbisser, she basically came through and took third right in the last third again. It always happens at the Atlas. It's very much, it's never over till it's over. I mean, we've seen it before with Drickers Kurtzy scratching with like 20k to go or something like that. So yeah, again, really, really interesting race for the women. A few other little kind of, basically I'm just going to pick out a few riders to talk about. So the race tracker actually crashed. The map progress crashed when the race started, and that's primarily due to one person. So Fritz Meinke, I think is how you pronounce it. He was 88th, but he's a German influencer and YouTuber, and he's got like 1 million followers, and he takes on all these kind of big endurance adventures, not necessarily cycling, but he decided to enter the Atlas Mountain Race, and brought a huge German audience, so much so that the tracker crashed because there was so much web traffic. So again, I guess it's good for bikepacking and ultracycling. Well, if you're interested in seeing the sport grow. So yeah, cool to see Fritz there, and hopefully brought some new people into the sport. The first non-binary rider was Anna Richter. They came 15th overall, which actually, I mean, at like top 20, 30 in the Atlas Mountain Race is a hell of an effort. So yeah, that was really, really great to see. Overall was won by Victor Bozzoni. So that's two big victories in a row. So he won the Transcontinental Race last year, which was his big breakthrough, but he rode a very controlled race here. So we talked about Cynthia and the way she rode, and Victor was similar actually. He took his time to sleep. He wasn't necessarily chasing the lead in the early days. He'd find himself kind of right up there, and then he'd rest a bit and the other riders would kind of pull away, but he basically just played an ace at the end and took the lead at the final day and just totally smashed it. And I think it just goes to show, I think the days of not sleeping in ultra races, I think people are realising that's not the most efficient manner. And when we think back to the first edition when Sofiane Zahidi didn't sleep at all, it's a long way from that. And, at one point, Victor went 15 minutes or so off course to get a bed in an auberge. And it just shows it pays back. Well, certainly when you're strong enough, like Victor is. Maybe not pay back so much for me. But yeah, really great win from Victor. He was Sebastian Trimborn, he was another German rider with a kind of a big following. So he was leading early on, but he faded at the end. He was in actually the Hellenic Mountain Race last year and did similar, went out really hard, but then kind of cracked a bit. I think he's still a little bit inexperienced with this, and maybe I think he kind of slept outside quite a lot and ended up getting a really like bad chest, which can also happen in Atlas. There's a lot of cold, dry air. There's a lot of hot, dusty air, both at the same time, and it really does play havoc. I think everyone who's done Atlas will understand the Atlas cough, which always kind of crops up. And yeah, I think he caught up with him and he ended up slowing down. I think he was 5th in the end or something like that. Another name we picked up in our pre-race chat in the first episode of this year, was Rob Britton. Again, he's a former pro road racer. He was at the front very early on, but again, I think it's always refreshing to see the guys who are obviously world class. I mean, he won Unbound XL last year in the States, which is huge. He's won Badlands, but he just I think he had knee issues, then stomach issues. And it just goes to show that it's not all about legs in these races. But it's cool to see people like Rob taking part, and I'm sure he'll be back. So yeah, kind of good for the sport. Chris Millman, again, a new rider. He's done, not a new rider, but he's new to this kind of length of race. I think this was his longest race he'd done. He's done Unbound XL and things like that, and the Tracker 560 last year where he was third. So he's a very, very strong rider again. But again, he had knee issues. And also a funny story on his Instagram, his free hub froze up. So the solution to a frozen free hub, it turns out, is to have a pee on it, and that solved the issue. So, you know, Becky, if you're in Sweden and it gets cold and you happen to be riding and the free hub freezes up, you know what to do.
Well, I can confirm, Josh, I think that's a bit easier for a man with a bit more aim. I know a friend who tried this. It's a little trickier if you're not a man.
That's a discussion for a different podcast, I suspect. Thomas Beret. Moving on, Thomas Beret. Again, he's finished third before. I think this was his 5th time. He's done it pretty much every time I've done it. He's just really consistent and really stubborn, and he always really comes through really strong at the end. So he finished 5th. So he was kind of like the best of the rest after the first sort of pack, I think. But again, a really, really strong ride. He broke his back last year, if you remember, and he's a new dad as well. So the fact he's still up there riding consistently is really good to see. I
came across his Substack actually over the weekend. And he'd written in it, he's written a really good piece. And the main thing that I took away from it was that he quite openly admitted he wanted to win. And it was just quite refreshing to hear someone say that.
Yeah, he takes it very seriously. Yes, I think he just is a competitor. He wants to win. He trains really hard. He's a really good trainer, trains like really scientifically. And then he kind of, I think he gets the best out of himself as well. And unfortunately for him, he's probably found this kind of way of training and form probably 5 years too late. 'Cause if he'd been doing it 5 years ago, I'm sure he would have won a lot of stuff. But yeah, I guess it's kind of how it is. The level's getting so high now that it's just really hard. But I think if you can get top 5 in Atlas, then you're one of the top guys. So yeah, it's good to see from Thomas. Another rider, so second place, we've not really talked about the overall men's podium yet. So Victor won. Second place was Ole Bjorn Smithgel. I think that's kind of how I say it. So he's Norwegian. So he's a very good gravel racer. So he's won a couple of big gravel races and done a couple of ultras, but this is probably the biggest one he's done. And yeah, he found himself in a bit of a battle with Victor. So basically he'd be kind of from like halfway when Sebastian started sort of fading a bit with his chest infection. He ended up taking the lead, and then Victor would kind of catch him, have a big sleep, and then he'd ride past again. I think he was sleeping a bit having smaller sleeps than Victor, but ultimately I think sleep pays. So Victor caught him near the end, but he came in for second, which was great for a debut. And then in third place, excuse my Polish pronunciations, so Radoslav Golbecki, I think that's how you say it. I've heard him called the granddad of ultra racing in Poland, but 47 years old, really strong ride. He's won pretty much everything there is to win in Poland. He didn't sleep much, but just was very consistent and came in third. There's still hope. There's still hope as I'm getting older, and all the old guys with all the young people coming in, that you can still do this. And yeah, that was when you look at it, that's a fantastic ride from him. So that was kind of a roundup. And finally, Albion, they sponsor the races, and they support me and Becky. Well, sometimes, and Becky's got her rain gear now, but they were doing their free repairs after the race, which is kind of a really cool thing. So actually they head out to the race finish. Graham, who's the head designer, he loves just fixing stuff, so they repair all the racers' gear on the finish line, which I think is a really nice, cool thing. So yeah, big shout out to Albion. I think there's probably a discount code somewhere, so if I find it, I'll put it on screen for you all. And so that was the Atlas Mountain Race.
I messaged our mate Jack at Albion, to see if he picked up on any stories from their repairs booth kiosk at the finish. And he said it's often like a therapy chair. People going to sit down for the first time after the race and just spill their guts to Jack and the other people who work at Albion. So he said there's a bit of repair confidentiality. But what he has said is that he felt like everyone who crossed the line needed a repair of some sorts. They fixed a lot of sleeping bags and mats. They fixed someone's tent and a bunch of insulated jackets. although he reckons a lot of their repairs were actually from fixing the ripped waterproof jackets and trousers from where riders must have fallen in the first few days of the race where there was wind, rain, and ice. He mentioned that one rider had travelled overland to the race and had therefore put quite a lot of miles by the time they got to Esquarria into their kit. So he pulled out 2 jerseys, a jacket, bib shorts, and even asked them to fix his tea towel, which was fraying at the edges. So someone's got their
So there we go. If you've got any holes in your cycling kit, all you need to do is complete one of the mountain races and you can get it repaired for free at the end.
The last wrap up we'll do is about the race around Rwanda. Starting at a similar time to the Atlas Mountain, but many, many kilometers away. We saw Benedict Borsos win in 2 days and 6 hours. It's about 1,000-kilometer course, so it's relatively quick, especially given there was quite a lot of heavy rain in the last night through the rainforest, and that actually spanned the front pack and the back of the pack, I think. So a lot of riders got quite wet on that second night. And it's 2 days, 6 hours, which I believe is the fastest time at Race Around Rwanda. But off the top of my head, I'm not sure how different the route is each year. I think the core of it's quite similar, but maybe a few variations.
Yeah, I think they vary it sometimes. We talked about it the other year. There was sort of border clashes with the Congo, I think, which meant forced a change. But yeah, it's mostly the same.
And behind him were 2 Belgians, Guillaume Despolberg. He came in 7 hours behind, and Samuel Tonello followed him only, I think, 90 minutes later. That's our men's podium. And our women's winner was Hannah Gaza Idrisi in 4 days, 6 hours. And that's a name that will be quite familiar to a few people. I think she might have taken a bit of a break from bikepacking. So it's good to see her back, especially ready to race in February, given she lives in, I think, Austria. So it's no.
It's been quite mild, though, I think, in Innsbruck. Alex, my friend, is saying it's basically they've had no snow. Okay. And then this week it's just dumped. So I think it's warmer in Innsbruck than it's been everywhere else in Europe. So if you want like a nice winter break, go to Innsbruck.
Two names that we picked out pre-race were Finley Newmark and Dreykus Coetzee. We've already mentioned Dreykus earlier this podcast from his scratch at Atlas Mountain a couple of years ago. And he then scratched at Rwanda as well due to too many crashes. And Finley also scratched due to a sore knee. So it's, shame to see both of them out, given it's such a long way to travel as well.
So thanks for that roundup, Becky. And now this is the section I'm really looking forward to. We're going to head over to part 2 and have our chat with Juan. So on to the second part of today's podcast. And we've got this month's guest. And I'll do a bit of an introduction before we say hello. So for the first time ever, we've got a Tour de France stage winner on the podcast. So welcome, Juan Antionio Flecha. You've raced from, was it 1999 to 2013 in the World Tour. And you've won a stage of the Tour, finished in the top 10 8 times at Paris-Roubaix with a podium spot. And also, probably the bigger results are finishes at the Badlands, Bazajan, Transsiberica, Tracker Adventure, Further Elements, and last week, the Atlas Mountain Race. So, Juan, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Becky. And well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you, and especially big fan of the podcast and all your content. Josh, I think people like we learn a lot with your content. So thanks. And just one thing, I wrote professional from 2000 to 2013. But anyway.
We gave you an extra year there then.
Yeah. Would have been better after, but anyway, I was completely burnt out when I finished, so I couldn't have done one more year at the World Tour level. Definitely not.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Well, that kind of leads us on to the first question. I mean, you spent all those years racing professionally, all like the biggest races in cycling, really, at the highest level of the sport. So how on earth did you end up riding around Morocco eating omelettes and bread for a week? How does someone who's ridden that, that kind of, I guess, the peak of the cycling world, how did you end up in this world?
Well, I think two things. Obviously being inspired by riders like you. Remember, regardless of having done some ultras last year, I happened to be at the finish line in Zeer when you were about to finish. And I was on holidays with my family. And I was like, God, I mean, I like ultras, but I don't think Atlas is my thing. You know, I was like, guys are on mountain bikes. I'm not a mountain bike guy. You know, like, well, I don't even have the gear. No, it's not, definitely not. But then, you know, kept thinking about it, kept, you know, studying more about it, got inspired and excited about it, and just ended up doing Atlas Mountain Race and completing the route, which I'm very proud this year. And yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is because I gave a really long break to my professional career. I've done 14 as professional, but then it's not that I follow up with cycling apart from working at Eurosport as a talent and all those things. But I felt always as staying cycling behind the barriers, which was nice. And I could see from behind the barriers, I could enjoy it, but without really being involved with any team or anything like that. And I was in lots of other sports. I was doing surfing, windsurfing. So I feel all that gap, let's say, of years, I would say more than 6 years, if not 7, just not having the bicycle as a priority. And all of a sudden it came. You know, my friend really encouraged me to do Badlands with him as a pair. That was 2022, 2023. And he had just lost his wife. His wife was Emma was she would do like adventure, like they were part of all those adventure teams that they do the Fiji contest and all those ultra distance. They were partners with Rebecca Rush as well, you know, in the team. So she was very inspirational, very inspiring woman. She was PhD, all these things, and anyway, she died very early. And her husband, which is my friend who I had ridden in the past, said, "Please, let's do Badlands, do it for me." And I was like, no, you know, I don't want to do it. You know, why I would jump into an ultra cycling? And but he knew I would like it. And at that same year, I took part of Tracker 360, and that Balance was about to be in September. And I took part of Tracker 360, and I realized how bad I was. I don't think I ever suffered that much, and I wouldn't say suffer as physically, but I pushed my body so hard without being ready for it that I really felt like my heart was like, had been over, you know, has done something over what he was ready for, you know, and I really say to myself, I can't carry on like that, you know. It's good to do other sports, but I'm an endurance athlete, and I better carry on doing endurance because it didn't feel right, you know. I finished that tracker, but I thought that by finishing that, my health wasn't right. You know, I could finish it after 20 something hours, but A, I really enjoy it, and B, I say, well, you got to train, you got to be ready for Badlands because it's not I thought bikepacking, you know, was a bit of a joke, but I realized it wasn't. And from that moment, that was a turning point, and I was ready for Badlands. We won it as a pair. It was very emotional, obviously. And from that on, I just just wanted more. I just wanted to do the next one and the next one and till now.
Had you ridden in that sort of intervening 6-7 years after you retired, or did you just not touch the bike at all?
I did touch it, but not. I mean, 1 hour, 2 hours. And I was doing complete different sport, which was more like your upper body and you know, when you want to get away, you got to do a sprint, you know. So the efforts are totally different. You swim out, but it's complete different effort. And I will be on the bike, but for those Eurosport recce, which is like almost a fake. Basically, you do go up, climb, they film you, and you stop maybe 20 times for a 10 kilometers climb, right? So I wouldn't call that riding. I did start riding before Badlands, like be more consistent. Basically, that's what the bike wants, right? That's what the bike wants from you. Like the bike wants you to be consistent on it. Otherwise, there's no way you're gonna perform anywhere. So that's, I knew that, and I said, all right, well, little by little, let's get back to it.
I suppose the your mindset was that of the elite cyclist still, and then the body was just saying no. It's obviously not that same level anymore. And I guess the two kind of clashed in that first race back.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, probably my body was obviously still living out of the credits of having been professional for so many years. On a way, the performance, or at least the way of being able to suffer or identify certain moments of fatigue. And that's probably something I find at ultras. Like I identify the fatigue with certain moments of a Grand Tour, especially the third week of the Tour de France. That fatigue is quite similar. And in a way, it's something you miss, obviously, because you know you've done that for so many years, and it's something that's just coming along with you for so many years. That when you go back to that fatigue and that feeling of being on the bike, exhausted, and having to pedal and having to reach the next point, or being exhausted in the morning and having to get on the bike again to do another mountain stage, that's sort of something I identify and I sort of find when I'm back on an ultra, and I like it. You know, it's a good. I think it's part of me already, and it's good to reencounter it and to meet that aspect again.
You've talked a lot about how much you've done on the bike over so many years, and you mentioned a bit about thinking that bikepacking was a bit of a joke. I wondered what surprised you about bikepacking, because it's so different to the cycling that you knew for so long.
Well, I completely underestimated the way of bikepacking being a discipline of cycling. Like you didn't have to race, right? I thought bikepacking was basically touring, and you had tons of time to complete a route, which actually is the opposite. You you do think that because you have that much time doesn't mean you're gonna achieve it. You know, I think look at Atlas this year. How many people was forced to scratch and was behind the snail? It's because if you think you're gonna complete in 8 days, that's the first mistake. I think you got to think your goal's got to be 7 days, because if you're lucky, you're gonna end up finishing on 8 days. You know, so it is it is super challenging. And I thought bikepacking was like easy, slow, and no rush because of the aesthetic of it. Yeah, it doesn't look fast, right? Well, maybe Justina's now he looks fine when he rides on a skin suit. On his story, a bit more fast than the first guys, but yeah, I mean, it was different. I remember also before coming to Badlands and all that, I did join Lachlan and Gus on a trip they did in for one of the movies. Because Gus was really like, come join us, and was the Shadow of the East movie. And obviously it was supported, it wasn't really bikepacking, but I sort of like, God, that's very nice. You know, I had watched some of the videos and movies, and I found them very inspiring. And when Gus invited me to join them, I was in a surf trick in Bali. I was having a great time. I was all right. If I'm coming, you know, um, I won't be fit. And there were no worries, you'll be fine. And it wasn't fine, you know, regardless of, I mean, I got sick. I mean, I couldn't ride on the second day. I felt terrible about it. So that was my first click. All right, this is not really bikepacking, because they have an assistance, but they did have a route that is quite challenging to complete, and I haven't been able to. So that was probably my first flag and say like, hold on, this is not as easy as it might sound. So yeah, it requires a lot of work, a lot of mental strength, a lot of preparation in all aspects, not just physicals. You know, and being open to having to improvise. You know, that's a great thing. It's more an adventure most of the times, but not everyone is ready for an adventure, right? Not everyone is happy with that.
And do you think that, let's compare to say completing a Grand Tour, which is, I guess, probably perceived as one of the pinnacles of endurance sports in the world, how do you think those skills that you kind of learned there, is it a similar kind of process mentally and physically, or like you said just now, is it almost harder in bikepacking because of all the other things around it aside from cycling?
Yeah, I think on a Grand Tour, obviously you are like, especially nowadays, probably not 60 years ago, when I remember talking to riders from the 60s, while Spain was still around civil war and all that. They had to do the tour. And this rider, Miquel Poblet, who passed away maybe not long ago, who's been actually podiuming in Paris-Roubaix as well. So he explained me how his wife had a special permit to come and visit him at the tour. So his wife will come to Tour de France to do his washing. So when you think about it, it's like, God, so it wasn't that easy to get your washing done, right? It wasn't that easy to get a meal. And I think an ultra is even more than that, because you're on your own and you got to get things done by yourself. So, but nowadays it's totally different, right? So all you have to do as a cyclist is just to perform, right? There's a team of people looking after you for all the rest, which makes that performance on the bike even more competitive, because that means, I mean, especially the type of rider I was more domestic on a grand tour, had to cover those attacks, early breakaways, all that. So you will wake up in the morning exhausted, and you will know to be 50 kilometers full on attacks, and you got to be there. You know, if it will be more than 5 riders, you have to be in there. So that's a lot about putting the switching on automatic, not really thinking about how you're feeling, just getting done, just pedal and just jump on that brake, and just don't think about how shit you feel, basically. And I think on an ultra, after the second or third day, that's what's all about. You can't expect being all like fresh and ready to pedal, you know? And that's the moments that your mind, you got to sort of fight your mind and say like, well, I mean, you got to get to the next checkpoint. You got to get to the next resupply point. That's your goal. And I think that's what it hooked me to the discipline as well. You know, the uncertainty, the fact of being so exhausted and still having to switch that automatic mode, not having to think much about how you feel, and the pleasure, obviously, once you're there. It's like being on a breakaway, right? Like, it's like all of a sudden you look around and say, oh, I'm here, you know, I made it to the group. I saved my day. Or you're in the gruppetta, you know, you made it within the time cut, you know, all those things are little wins, you know. I always say cycling is a sport that not just the first rider wins, you know, one guy wins. It's not that the rest 200 loses, you know, everyone has a victory, and it is the same basically in ultra cycling. You see everyone who's completed the route super happy about it, and for them it's like a victory, and they should be proud, obviously, because it's not easy at all. It's not easy at all.
Probably even more so in ultra cycling, because, you know, everyone's got all these, the best stories always come from like the mid and the back, and
Yeah.
you know, you get fixated about, you know, the winners in the top 10 a bit, but actually they're the guys there. I always said, like, well, I've won a couple of events and I always felt a bit guilty because everyone gives you a bit of attention, like, oh, well done, you've won it, you were so fast. And I think, yeah, but I had it easy because I've done it 4 days quicker than a lot of people, or a week quicker. And that's just another week of suffering, isn't it? It's another week of finding your own food and being dirty and not knowing where you're going to sleep and just pedaling. Like 4 days pedaling is quite a long time. So it's it's definitely the best stories, and I think the real heroes are probably those in the mid pack and beyond.
Yeah. I remember the last dinner at Atlas, there was so many good stories of people who had issues and they still managed to get to the finish line. People who left the bike, went in a taxi to get something fixed, went back to the bike, you know, all those things. Like, wow. I mean, how, you know, how people manage not to scratch, right? Or people who maybe thought, oh, I will be scratching, and then they get on the bike and they don't scratch, they carry on, you know. So yes, plenty of stories. Everyone has their own stories, and yeah, I mean, there's no excuses, because I always say that Paris-Roubaix, you know, was my favorite race. Before the start, my mindset was like, all right, it's quite normally if I end up having 2 or 3 flat tires, and if I crash 2 times, I would be within the average. So every time I had a flat tire or had a crash, I said, well, I'm still within the average, so it's still going all right? So it's like, I couldn't pretend making it to Roubaix without a mechanical, without a flat tire, without a crash. That's exceptional, right? Like, that's the very little guys who has it. The normal is to have issues, and that's also a mindset for an ultra. You know, if you expect covering 5 days, 6 days, 7 days on a bike with nothing happening, well, good luck. You know, like that's not normal. That's not normal.
I think that's a differentiating factor as well. You know, it's dealing with those issues, and I think the guys that win, they always kind of have, they're the ones that deal with stuff and don't kind of crack or scratch because they feel cold. And, you know, I think a few guys were close on that first night, from what I gather. It sounded horrendous. Even Victor said so. Victor said he was about to scratch.
Oh my God, was he? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
before
bumped
CP1.
into I bumped into Rob Britton at CP3, I think, and he had a quick chat. He just arrived when I was having breakfast, and he explained that he was like, "Listen, I'm Canadian, and I have never experienced that cold." I mean, he was like, "That wasn't normal," because obviously they were the first guys doing that night, and probably they're riding that high intensity that I was doing, which is good, but obviously you're racing more and didn't want to stop. I remember I did stop. I had a lot of issues on the first night with the rain. I had issues with the tracker, wouldn't work, so my hands were freezing, couldn't really turn it on. I stopped with someone with a stove, could warm my hands to turn it on, so, and they kept turning it off. And anyway, I was a bit concerned about it because, God, I don't want to. This thing needs to be working, right? And then the computer also was like, the battery was like going down, like it was midnight. I was already 50%, and it was the Wahoo Ace, which is meant to last 30 hours. Anyway, nothing was really reacting well with the cold and the wet conditions. So at some point, I was around some villages. Cynthia was around. I was having a quick chat. Hey, how are you feeling? I feel okay, all right, good. And she's like, I'm gonna go stop for water. I said, okay. And then I saw another house with a little shop, and they had a fire inside. So I'm gonna get inside. So I got inside, had dinner there, took all my clothes off, put new dry clothes on, and stayed there for an hour. I said, I couldn't do it anymore. I was freezing. I said, I don't mind. I could see rider passing by. I saw riders going and coming backwards, asking for a room. It's like, it was it was terrible. And it was funny because then obviously I had put all my dry clothes back on, and I had my down jacket on and my thermal and all that. So it was nice. It was great. I started like overtaking riders, and on one of those really frozen climbs, I overtook a rider, and he said, "Oh, so you're already wearing your down jacket?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "What are you gonna wear when it gets really cold?" I don't know. This is all I've got now. But I was fine. But anyway, it was funny how people was like freaking out. I mean, you could see them like all wet, still in the rain gear, and like, but being very slow, obviously, because they were frozen. People was like,
And
anyway.
I think that's pretty sensible watching the tracker, and you could see that you kind of obviously dropped a load of places on that first night, but you were very gradually but consistently catching people throughout the whole race, and you were, was
Yeah.
it 14th or 15th in the end? I can't remember exactly which.
I was 14th. I lost one position in, that town, that village on the coast before you turn into a Sayura,
Yeah.
Silikauki. So I had a burger there. I had no phone. I didn't know where I was, what position I was. I couldn't check anything for the last 2 days. And I knew that spot because last year when I had surfed there, we had lunch in that place. And I could say, all right, if I make it there, I need a burger there. And, Moroccan burgers are not particularly quick. So I was sitting there on that desk. I did let my bike there leaning so next to the road. So whoever would come would see I was there. Anyway, and I was on the terrace and I could see this rider. I said, oh no, there we go.
But was it worth it? Was it a good burger?
It's just like, listen, 14th look better than 13th, right? So,
Well, I still think that's a pretty good debut at the Atlas Mountain Race, because it's
thanks.
very much a race where, as you probably know, but now I imagine you've realised that experience is invaluable on Atlas,
Yeah.
and just knowing where stuff is, how long gaps are between resupplies, just how to ride it. It's I think it's a race that definitely favours experience.
It probably does, but then you look at Victor winning this year on debut. It's like, whoa! I mean,
Yeah.
that's very impressive. But yeah, it definitely, there's a lot of things going on, and obviously I had some issues. I had some health issues with infected tooth, which was very painful. I had a broken chain. I had some little minor issues, I would call it. But I think if you've never done it, you need to plan it very well. And by planning it very well, you need to do a lot of research and study a lot of things, which obviously I didn't. I mean, if I would have been on a higher position, I reckon I should have done that. Just for instance, I was on the Colonial Road I didn't know that was the Colonial Road, you know. I didn't. I thought it was later towards the end, you know, things like that. And sleeping, I slept all days outside. You know, even I did have some sleep on the on the checkpoints, but I BB every night. You know, I just whenever I would feel tired, I would just. I mean, it was too nice not to do it, right? Like those guys are so nice. It's like, come on. I remember at CP3, I slept an hour there, and it was so noisy and people coming in. Now that I left and I went down to sleep an hour later again. You know, it's like, oh, now I can. This is a good spot. I'd rather sleep here. So I was I wrote a lot with the flow. You know, a lot like improvising a lot and just enjoying. Was a mix of enjoying it and racing, which I don't regret. But obviously, I know which. I mean, if I would done it again, as everyone else, you know, if I would ride again with experience, I would plan it a bit better probably, and I would change some things, but not much. But hopefully, I would have been faster. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe slower.
Sounds like we'll see you again then.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Same like the way to Afra. I remember watching one of your videos saying you didn't stop at Afra, and you sort of regret it. Anyway, so I knew, okay, I have to stop at Afra, and I had met over Christmas Liam and Jesse, and I did ask him a bit. I said, "Hey, how is that long stretch with that resupply before Afra?" And they were like, "Oh, it's just a climb. It's just a climb there." God, when I got there, I had to walk like 10 times. It's like, and it was super windy. I couldn't stay on the bike. You know, it's like, it's not a climb, man. It's not. It's not.
Yeah, it's not exactly paved, is it?
No. Anyway, there's a lot of laughs, a lot of like thinking like. Anyway, before Afra, I thought the shop would be shut, so I kept looking for a place to sleep. So I was scouting places and some little villages there, and at the end, I said maybe I find a place at Afra, and then boom, the shop was open. They had some room to sleep. I said, oh, this is a bonus.
Yeah, everyone knows about the
So,
Atlas now. All the villagers, they all come out and stay open late because they know they can probably make like a
oh,
month's worth of money in a night.
a fortune.
It's great though.
It is. Anyway, well, it was great fun. Honestly, it was great fun. It was sad to that finish. It's one of those events that is finishing. You're like, oh God, already. You know, like I sort of want to be again. You know, I experienced like things like none other ultras. They're all different, but this one is. Oh, I think it stays in my heart. You know, it's like one of those like, come on, it's unbelievable. Sunrises, you're in those months, say, whoa, where I am, you know, where is this, you know, and you're solo, which is something rare on an ultra as well. I remember Nelson at the start saying, oh, I think from day 2 onwards, everyone will be on their own. And yeah, indeed, you're on your own most of the time. So it's just, it's sort of, he wants you that. And then you realize why, you know, it wouldn't be the same if you'd be surrounded by another bunch of riders or media crews or whatever, you know. You could be on your own there to really enjoy it.
Well, it's brilliant hearing all the stories from the race, and it sounds like a proper adventure. And it seems like I've read a couple of your interviews that you've done since you started bikepacking, and it sounds like you really love the uncertainty and the adventure, which is quite surprising for someone from what I imagine to be a very controlled environment in World Tour racing.
Yeah.
And as you've raced a couple of Camille's races, I assume you're a bit of a romantic on the bike and a bit of a purist. And I was wondering, what does cycling give you now that after all these years of cycling, it's so different to what you knew originally?
I think it's given me what I enjoyed the most about cycling, which was going out for rides without really planning and without proper schedule. I always say, I think from the moment of, you know, power meters arrive and proper training arrived to cycling, everyone became better, but it sort of killed the adventure essence of cycling. It killed it. And it's probably what I enjoyed the most. You know, I moved before turning professional, I moved to the Pyrenees. I used to train a lot in Font Romeu, not far from here. It's an hour, 2 hours from where I live in Barcelona. And you know, I remember in the summer just getting on the train there, just getting to the training camp and spending a couple of weeks there without really just the only thing I had to do was ride my bike without knowing the routes, without knowing the climbs, just getting a map, asking the locals. So it was a bit of an adventure. And obviously later on, GPX arrived, power meters, Wahoo, Garmin's, all these gadgets, which makes our lives much easier. But on a way, they have killed the adventure of cycling. And I think adventure's been always a part of cycling, very important part, at least for me. That's what I really liked it. That's probably what it hooked me the most about the sport. And nowadays, with bikepacking, that comes back. You know, you can have all those gadgets, you can have all that, but still, all that uncertainty, still that way of like how I'm going to complete this route and where is the organizer wants me to be now. You know, that's a surprise effect. It's like coming to a new climb. You know, it's like back in the days, I remember like before you can see a route, you can plan, you can see, oh, on other Kumul Strava, right, with GPS, you can see, oh, look, everyone's been riding through this area. I'm sure it's a nice area. But back then, I would get to the Pyrenees, I would look up to a bike shop and ask, hey, how about that climb? Where do you suggest I will go, you know? And I would say, oh, go try this one. And maybe I would get there and I was covered in snow. So I had to wait for another 2 weeks to get there. You know, I had to come back on the same direction. I've done that as a professional with no one really checking whether it was right or wrong to do it, you know, because no one really, back in then, I didn't have a coach, or you just show up at the races and see how fit you were. But later on, everything evolved more to focus on performance and yeah, focus on like finish your ride and someone was looking at your, you know, judging your training and your ride and say, oh, you know, you got to do stronger tomorrow or you got to do more hours or less. And I was the rider I always overdid probably what I was planned or what someone planned to me to do, because I think I always wanted to go farther and stay on the bike longer. And with bikepacking, obviously, no one's telling you. It's just the opposite, right? The longer you're on the bike, the better. So for me, it's back to that. I'm a bit old now. I feel like when I do an ultra, like, God, I'm getting asleep or I need to stop for sleep. Like, for example, I stopped twice going up the Stelvio, the Moroccan Stelvios. I fallen asleep. I was like, God, I don't want to descend this climb on these conditions. You better stop it. You better stop again for sleep. But yeah, I mean that's great. That's a fantastic feeling, and it connects with the cycling I love, with the cycling I believe on.
So have you kind of gone, like with your training, have you kind of done a full circle now from the early days when you were just riding to the scientific data-led training, and now you're just back to that those early days?
Yeah, I think it is. So you start like you go back to those early days. Still, I mean, for Atlas, I have prepared myself. I have gone back to training peaks. I have gone back to see where I was, my form. And it was very useful. And so I think the right balance of everything is a good to go, the way to go. You know, I think the tools are there, so it's good to use them. But obviously, being Atlas fit is not Tour de France or Paris-Roubaix fit, right? Like it's a different fitness you need to be at.
Yeah, and also when you're in the middle of the Atlas Mountains and you've run out of food and it's
Oh.
too cold at night and it's going to be too hot in the later in the day, it doesn't really matter what your training peak said. It's nothing to do with that by that point, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And when you get to the, I mean, I remember like, because I had broken my phone and my screen from my phone wouldn't work. So I think that was after CP3. So I stopped a local, said, please, can I use your phone? They let me call home, say, everything's fine. It's just, I won't be able to communicate until I get to the finish line or whoever. And so that was one thing. And then, so I had my notes on the phone, right? Like a bit of like resupply points and all that. But I remember like crossing the sand section and say, all right, I'm going to load, because I had two computers. I had like, I always bring the workhorse, which is the Chorus. I find like a workhorse, that machine always work. And I have the Wahoo, which the Wahoo is almost like a phone, right? So if I would load at the route on the Wahoo, I could see everything. It was very, very handy. And I loaded up on the Wahoo the next 200 kilometers of the route. And I realized, God, there's nothing until you reach the coast. There's absolutely, I panic, a sort of panic. I was on these villages and I stopped at one village and the guy, because they just quiet, relax, just like, give me a coffee, make me an omelette. I was just trying to buy as much as I could because, like, God, it's going to be a long night with nothing, you know? So it's those moments that, like, shit, you know, like, I need a plan and I don't have a plan, you know? It's like, I need to make it over those climbs. I need to make it to the coast. And yeah, there's not going to be food. There's not going to be water. There's not, you know, I panic, you know, I was scared, you know,
It's a deceptive
I
section
felt
as well.
small. Huh?
It's a
It
very
is?
deceptive section and very, very hard because you do that last climb and you think you're done. And I've
Yeah.
cracked twice on that section
Oh
and lost
my
like
God.
3 or 4 places and had to have a sleep.
Oh my God. There you go. You see, no, it's terrible. And then you get to that big reservoir. Anyway, yeah, you get scared sometimes. Scared in a way, like, I gotta survive these. You know, it's not going to be easy. And the story of the food is like, you're lucky if someone makes you an omelette. You know, you're lucky if someone makes you that. You know, it's like this. Like, I was. There's nothing. You know, there's like those snacks you can find that don't really fill you up. And you know that by that time of the route, you know that. So that's the problem. So,
Yeah.
but it's great fun. It's great fun. And I mean, also surprises you. You're in Morocco. I mean, I never locked my bike, you know, I never felt unsafe. I never, you know, I would give the guys my wallet at the shops because they don't speak your language, they don't speak English. They type a number on the calculator machine and say, oh, this is the amount. I said, well, here's my money, take as much as you need. And yeah, because we couldn't communicate. So it was quite surprised how you could trust people, you know, not all of them, but I got also charged 200 dirhams for an omelette. And the rider ahead of me got charged 20, you know, so it's like, God, someone was a bit too smart there, but you don't care, obviously. But as I say, 95% of the people who you bump with are super honest. And that's a great surprise as well, you know, in the world we're living. You have a prejudgment, you know, about a lot of things. And then you go to Morocco, to the Atlas. As I say, no need to lock the bike anywhere at any time. I will give them my money and they will take as much as it was and return my money. And maybe it was 10 dirhams, you know, not even a euro. And yeah, that's those moments you don't forget, right? Those are like, God, there's hope in this world.
Yeah. It restores faith in humanity a little bit, doesn't it? And
Yes.
it's probably one of the takeaways I always get as well. You know, you visit countries and do these races, which maybe are kind of, you hear bad things about, and then you get there and realize the people are just people. You know, I think governments and people are not necessarily connected in the way they view the world. And as a traveler, quite often you're very much looked after, which is,
Yeah.
it's an important lesson. You know, it makes you kind of realize you've got to be nice to everyone.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Because at some point you're gonna expect being people nice to you, and
Yeah.
when you need it,
It pays back,
and
doesn't
some,
it, at some
yeah,
point?
yeah, yeah. And the kids, you know, you're in the middle of nowhere. Those villages you cross, there's kids there. It's like, what life are they having? You know, but in a way, it's like they're gifted. You know, in a way, you think like, well, they're here. It's not bad. You know,
Yeah, you
you
kind of
give it.
don't really mind being ripped off by, you know, a local shop for an omelette when you think, well, actually, it's, you know, it's not much for me, but it's actually doing quite a lot for these
For
people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And also I don't know if you ever given something to a child, but I remember I had some spare flask, you know, like it's water flask. And there was this village and I gave one to one of the kids, some bunch of kids. Oh my God. They were like, I gave them this water bottle flask and they were like, they run away with that like it would be gold, you know. So it's like
Mm.
nothing, you know, sometimes nothing makes them so happy.
It's
They
amazing
don't
that the
need
kids
much.
in Morocco knew that you were Juan Antonio Flecha and they took the bottle.
It's on eBay now.
Yeah.
Did you sign it?
Well, there's a lot of good anecdotes, and with riders as well, you know, and the whole thing getting to CP checkpoint, and it's nice, you know, the whole atmosphere there when you bump into other riders, and yeah, anyway, maybe because I never experienced before, but I really like that format.
There's a reason people keep going back, and you see the same
Mm.
faces at these events. And I think it's just as you described, really, for everything you've described. You know, it's pushing yourself. You know, finding your limits, realizing actually you can do it, meeting people in the same kind of boat, and you know, realizing that, well, we're pretty privileged to be able to do it in the first place. When you meet a lot of these people in tiny villages in the mountains, and whether it be like Atlas or in Kyrgyzstan, or I imagine the same in Turkey, or even like on the more populated races like TCR.
Yeah.
For me, that's always a big one, because you travel through all sorts of cultures and countries, and it just puts everything in perspective. I remember the first time I did TCR, and I'd never been to the Balkans, and then I think one of the checkpoints was, it's in like I think we went through Sarajevo, and that's a place I'd heard about on the news, you know, because of the war and everything like that. And I thought, well, I just rode here from home, and it's a kind of quite an impact. Has quite an impact when you're kind of well, I was mid-20s, and you think, oh wow, all this stuff you hear about, it's not that far away. I rode here on my bike, you know. It puts in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact of you having reading there, you know, makes it completely different, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I think it opens your eye in a different way, and yeah, I mean, TCI especially goes through, you know, it always goes through many different countries, and for quite a long time, you know, because it's 4,000 kilometers. That's a long way. That's a very long way.
Are you tempted?
I am, but you know, we were having dinner. Andrew was there, you know, Andrew from last
one of the directors of the TCR.
Yeah, and Hannah. And anyway, my wife was asking, like, because my wife is clueless about what ultracycling is, right, and the events. So kept asking to Andrew, oh, what is TCR? What is it about? And Andrew was like, it's 4,000 kilometers. And my wife said, when is that? In July. So she turned around, looked at me, you're not fucking doing that.
Don't see you on the sideline then.
Oh, well. Let's see, you know, of course I'm tempted, but always have to negotiate at home first.
Okay, well, we got a couple more questions, so I'll start with, so basically my question is, so if you were beginning your cycling career now, you know, as a younger version of yourself, you know, the early thousands, just going out and pedaling, and you know, in the world before data, do you think you'd still be chasing that world tour career, knowing what you have to do to compete at that level? Or do you think you'd be more tempted to go down the kind of, you know, the gravel racing, ultra racing, privateer path?
It's a good question. I mean, the thing is, obviously when I was growing up, teenager, it was all about Tour de France and making it to Paris. And my dream as a teenager was making it to Paris. I remember, like, the final school graduation trip was Paris, and I said, nah, I want to see Paris on my bike. You know, I don't want to see it. I want to, my first vision of Paris has to be, and that was my dream, right? But I don't know if I will be growing up as a cyclist now with all these events around existing. Which one will be my choice? I don't know, you know, because I probably knew, especially you see how quickly riders burn out, quicker than before, you know, and you hear about all these monk lives and like training camps, and I don't know, probably that would be a bit off-putting. It's not an easy path becoming a world tour level cyclist. It's not an easy one in many aspects, in many aspects. It obviously has evolved a lot. That's why I don't really know what will be my choice, but I will be definitely quite tempted on taking the privateer path. Quite tempted. I probably will be more me. It will definitely be more me than entering a world tour, you know, life and team structure and bubble. As I say, you know, when I look at cycling now, I still really enjoy watching behind the barriers. I don't want to cross that barrier back again. You know, it's so. Probably I will go the privateer, the privateer path, and yeah, be, who knows, for longer, happier person.
One thing we haven't mentioned is that you are now a commentator or co-commentator at Eurosport on bike races, staying your now preferred side of the barriers. I think you mentioned in one of your Instagram posts about Josh's commentary. From commentator to commentator, can you rate Josh's commentary for us?
Well, I find it's super informative. I think you can learn a lot from it. Obviously, it's not for you need to understand. You can't enter maybe from zero level, but as soon as if you want to understand about these races, learn about these races, learn the strategy of these races, is great. Otherwise, it will be super hard to understand what's going on at Tour Divide, for example. And maybe Josh is telling you, oh, I think these riders have stopped now, and he tells you why he might be stopping there, and he takes the route and analyzes and checks a lot of things. So the perspective you get by watching Josh's race commentary and race update is, I strongly recommend it, because it hooks you to the race, to a race that you probably wouldn't be hooked otherwise, because you wouldn't really understand that. You would just see a dot there and progressing, and sometimes in 8 hours there's not much progress, right, on a bikepacking race, or 10 hours there's not much progress, but you need to understand why there's not much progress there, and why it might be happening, and what strategy. So he takes you to the bigger picture and goes back to the bigger, to the small. So it's excellent. I think I strongly recommend. And people who watches Josh's commentary, race commentary, and updates, they will probably learn a lot more about the discipline.
Sure,
Well,
it's very, very educational. Josh is
Yes.
blushing. I was going to say, Josh, once you've wiped those tears away, should we close up the episode?
Well, I was going to say that's the correct answer. I don't have to edit that part out now. So, so thanks.
Well done. Big fan of you guys.
Thank you. Likewise. I just find it like bizarre, guys like yourself who, I was the young guy watching the tour on TV. I remember watching you in your stage, and then I just find it mad that you're now in this world, this weird little world of cycling, which is becoming more mainstream. I think we have to admit that it is becoming part of a legitimate part of the cycling world. So yeah, I find it mad that it's gone full circle. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks,
yeah,
Josh. Thanks for the discipline. I mean, it is still cycling, and it's still people from cycling, right? And I think you're a good bunch. You're a great community, which is great to be part of, and that's the most important thing. So thanks for everything you bring into the sport and to the discipline and to cycling especially.
Great. Well, on that note, I think we better end, because I don't think I can take any more of that. But Juan, thanks so much for joining us. It's been really interesting, really insightful as well, and great to hear about your adventure in the Atlas. And sounds like hopefully we'll see some more of these races.
Definitely.
Becky, thanks as always for joining us. And well, I guess we'll see everyone next month for the next episode. So see you all then.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, guys. Bye.